Hey y'all, welcome to Tutor Town, where you just get to search for whatever you need all the time. Hmm? Or basically all the time. So this is another Epic on a Budget deck list. And so it does cost under $20. That's using TCG player prices. So when you click the link in the description below, you just change that to TCG player prices to see that. Also, you can optimize printings to make sure you're getting the best deal. All right, so let's jump into the deck. This is a very amusing one since we actually have just like tons and tons of one-ofs. Basically, I'll just go to categories so you can see kind of what we're doing with all this. This deck is built around Fierce Empath and Woodland Bellower, which are two tutors. We've got 4 Fierce Empaths. It's a 3-mana 1/1, because who doesn't love a good 3-mana 1/1, right? This one, when it enters the battlefield, you search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost 6 or greater. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Okay, so yeah, it's a 3-mana 1/1. Great chump blocker, by the way. But it lets you find any of your 6 and above creatures, okay, which we've got several of, with some really cool abilities. And one of the creatures it can find is Woodland Bellower. Okay, and of course you can just draw it naturally, but you can also just search for it. And that's funny because it is in fact a tutor as well. So this one is for green for 6/5, and when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a non-legendary green creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Okay, so this one importantly does just put it directly onto the battlefield, which is nice. All right, so basically you can search for anything, any of your green creatures with, since none of these are legendary, any of your green creatures with mana value 3 or less, which amusingly includes Fierce Empath. So each tutor can tutor for the other one. Pretty fun. That's not generally what you do with them, though. We've got lots and lots of fun stuff to tutor with either of them. All right, so let's look at those. Here we have the mana values, and the amusing jump from 3 to 6, because you can't actually tutor for anything between those. So sorry, all you 4 and 5 drops. All right, the idea is you ramp like crazy into a bunch of really big stuff, okay, and you get to pick what big stuff a lot of the time. Okay, so we've got a great Arbor Elf, a Utopia Sprawl Wildgrowth package. Arbor Elf is a very interesting little mana dork. Most mana dorks just tap to add mana. This one does not. What it does is it is a single green mana 1/1 that taps to untap target forest. Okay, and we have 18 forests, so there's generally a good target. And the cool thing is that with Utopia Sprawl and Wildgrowth, these are both enchantments that you use to enchant a land. Any land for Wildgrowth, or specifically a forest for Utopia Sprawl. We're just going to be using forests every time. And they each let you tap the land for more mana. So Wildgrowth says you enchant the land. Whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional green mana. And Utopia Sprawl says that you enchant a forest, and as it enters the battlefield, you choose a color. You might notice this deck is primarily green, so you always choose green. And whenever an enchanted forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of the chosen color. Okay, so functionally in this deck they're the same in almost every case. All right, so now the cool thing is that any of these little 1-drops can essentially ramp you for 1 mana. However, together they can ramp you for a lot more. So, for example, if you put a Wildgrowth on a forest, and then you have an Arbor Elf in play, you tap the forest for 2 mana, and then you tap the Arbor Elf to untap the forest, and you tap the forest for another 2 mana, and you have 4 mana. That's kind of fun, right? So it's almost like the Arbor Elf tapped for 2 mana. Right, and of course, if you get even more enchantments, it just kind of gets silly, right? Okay, so there's that. We also have Overgrown Battlement, which is another ramp creature. This one costs 1 and a green for 0/4 with Defender, so that means it can't attack, but it is pretty decent at blocking. And it has the ability to tap to add green to your mana pool for each creature with defender you control. So fairly often it'll just be a 0/4 that taps for green. However, if you do happen to get multiple of these overgrown battlements, you will actually get even more benefit, right? So if you have 2, each one will tap for 2 green mana. So nice thing is that any of these ramp spells are pretty good on their own, just ramping you for a single green mana, but all of them have the potential to be involved in ramping you for even more. All right. So then we have Scavenging Ooze, which is one of the things that we can find with Woodland Bellower, but it's also just a creature we can cast, and it's pretty good. So it's cost 1 and a green for 2/2, with a fun little ability, cost green to activate, and you exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze, and you gain 1 life. Okay, so that's rather convenient when you're facing a deck that likes to use their graveyard heavily. You can just exile whatever they cared about in their graveyard, and oftentimes that'll be creature cards, and then it gets bigger and you gain 1 life. Even if your opponent doesn't care about the graveyard, you can still exile their creature cards from the graveyard to gain life and put +1/+1 counters on. You can even exile your own stuff a little bit. Most of the things you don't care about too much. Some you do, so you'll just be a little bit careful. But any creature that grows and removes stuff for value is pretty good. Okay. Then we have a bunch of 3-drops. Okay. So we have, of course, Fierce Empath, as mentioned before, but we also have, things like Eternal Witness. So it costs 1 green for 2/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So that's pretty nice. If you played something and then it got killed, then you can just go get it. Okay, and one thing that we are planning on doing, which we'll get to in a second, is actually sacrificing or discarding some of our creatures. And so this actually can be pretty useful to just put it back into your hand for even more value. Okay, Champion of Lambholt costs 1 green for a 1/1, and creatures with power less than Champion of Lambholt's power can't block creatures you control. Specifically, and rather uniquely, this prevents creatures from blocking any creature you control if it doesn't have, if it has power less than Champion of Lambholt's power. Okay. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lambholt. So this can get kind of crazy, especially if your opponent has a bunch of small creatures. It's pretty easy to make it so that they just can't block. Right? Okay, so next up you have Llanowar Tribe. This is definitely one that you're very happy to just play in basically any game in the early game, because it's a 3/3 that taps for 3 mana, and you need to ramp anyway, so that's cool. It's also just a fun one to play if you need 3/3. You can just find it with Woodland Bellower. Okay, won't be your top target most of the time, because generally if you got Woodland Bellower, then you have enough mana. But we do have some 7-drops, so a little bit more ramp that Woodland Bellower can find you is pretty good. Predator Ooze, this is a fun card. Costs triple green as well, and it's a 1/1 that's indestructible. And whenever it attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever a creature dealt damage by Predator Ooze this turn dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Predator Ooze. And that's if it attacked or blocked or anything like that. Okay, so it can just get bigger. It can also just block for days. Great little creature. Okay, there are definitely some decks that this just beats because it's indestructible and it gets bigger. So nice little guy there. Reclamation Sage. This is definitely a utility creature. So you're very, very happy to find this with Woodland Bellower in case your opponent has an artifact or enchantment that you need to be rid of. Because it's a 3 mana 2/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. Okay, very simple and effective. Sharpshooter Elf. This is another piece of removal. Costs 2 and a green, and it has reach, and its power is equal to the number of creatures you control. Its toughness is 2. Okay, so it's always at least a 1/2. However, it can get fairly large. And when it enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature with flying and opponent controls. Okay, so we do have a little bit of reach or flying in this deck, but not a whole lot. And so it is really nice just to be able to get rid of flyers. And it also can just get big, and then it's a big blocker or a big attacker or whatnot, right? So all around useful. Watchful Radstag is a funny little card. Costs 2 and a green, and it's a 2/2 with Evolve. So Evolve means that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, then put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Okay, so whenever you play a bigger creature, whether that's toughness or power, then it gets bigger. And that's kind of nice. But it doesn't stop there. So whenever Watchful Radstag evolves, create a token that's a copy of it. Okay, so the fun thing is that this can actually kind of get a little silly if you have a bunch of creatures into the battlefield, because the first time, you just make a copy of this when it evolves, so then you'll end up with a 2/2 with a +1/+1 counter on it, and then a 2/2 token copy. But then, say another creature enters the battlefield with at least 3 power or toughness, then that token copy will evolve and make another token copy. That's pretty cool. So then what happens if you have a couple or few of them out and then a big creature comes into the battlefield? Well, then, if it's bigger than all of your Watchful Radstags, then all of your Watchful Radstags will evolve, and each one will create a token copy of themselves. So it can get a little crazy with this. Pretty fun, though. Super fun. It does take a tiny bit of time to get going. So that's one reason why we don't have 4 of them in the deck, because they don't really block a whole, like, you don't want to block with it early game. So that's one reason why we can just search for it, because especially if we're going to play some of our big creatures like Gruff Triplets, or that creates tokens, or some of our other large creatures, it can be kind of nice to have Watchful Radstag around to just get some extra value out of playing those big creatures, because you'll get token copies. Okay. All right, so that's a really fun card there. Yeah, Affection Indrik. Now we're at 6 mana. Okay, so we we have basically 2 toolboxes, right? We have our small toolbox and our big creature toolbox. These are ones we're going to be able to search for more frequently, because we have 4 of the Fierce Empath tutors and only 1 Woodland Bellower tutor. So we aren't going to be searching for these terribly frequently. However, we do have plenty of ways to search for 6 or greater. Okay, so Affection Indrik is basically a removal option for 6 mana. So it costs 5 and a green, and it's a 4/4. And when it enters, you can have it fight target creature you don't control. Okay, pretty straightforward. That works really well if your opponent has something smallish. Okay. Next up, we've got Disciple of Frailise, which is a very, very interesting card. I really, really like it in a number of different decks. This one is a land on the backside that can enter untapped if you pay 3 life. On the front side, though, it costs 3 green, 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 so a total of 6 mana, so we can search for it. And it's an Elf Druid. It's a 3/3. Okay. And when it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. And if you do, you gain life. You gain X life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. All right. So very nice way to draw more cards. Okay, and gain some life, which is never a bad thing. It's also a really great way to have a creature die, which is very nice for Gruff Triplets. So Gruff Triplets is 3 green, green, green for a 3/3 with trample, and when it enters the battlefield, if it isn't a token, you create 2 token copies of it. Okay, so you basically get 3 3/3s with trample for 6 mana, which is pretty great. That is a great way to get Watchful Radstag to evolve and make copies of itself. Then we have another ability, though. When Gruff Triplets dies, put a number of +1/+1 encounters equal to its power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplets. And there's absolutely nothing stopping you from having more than 3. I know they're triplets, but you can have 2 or 3, 4 sets of triplets, right? So you can then put +1/+1 encounters on lots of Gruff Triplets. Also, that is a great way to single-handedly win the game. You start out with 3/3/3s with trample, and then you just try to get one of them to die, and then the other one turn into 6/6s with trample. And if one of those dies, then you get a 12/12 trample. Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good. All right, and that is actually a great way to use Disciple of Freyalise, because you can just sacrifice one of your Gruff Triplets to Disciple of Freyalise to draw 3 cards, gain life, and make all your other Gruff Triplets bigger. Pretty solid, honestly. Okay, so that's why we have 4 copies of Gruff Triplets, because this is definitely one we want to draw and we're going to search for, and it's just a great card. You can definitely win plenty of games with Gruff Triplets. You can win plenty of games with 1 Gruff Triplets, but 2 Gruff Triplets is very effective at winning games. Okay, so we want to increase the consistency of that as much as possible. And one interaction to note is if you played Gruff Triplets and then Disciple of Freyalise, sacrificing the actual card Gruff Triplets, not one of the tokens, then you can actually use Eternal Witness to return it to your hand and play it again for more Gruff Triplets, right? And you could either just play Eternal Witness from your hand or find it with Woodland Bellower or whatever, right? So some fun options there. Alrighty, then a couple of these other ones. Generous Ent costs 5 and a green. It's a 5/7 with reach, and when it enters the battlefield, you create a food token, right? Which is an artifact with 2 tap. Sacrifice this artifact, you gain 3 life. So you can get some incidental life gain with that, which is convenient. It is also just a 5/7 with reach, so it's a phenomenal blocker, and it can even attack pretty well if you're not needing it to block. Right? And the other nice thing about this, though, is it has forest cycling. So you can pay 1 and discard it to search your library for a forest card and put it into your hand. Okay, so you can use Fierce Empath to tutor for either of these and either just play this as a land or forest cycle it. Forest cycle this one to get a forest to play. Okay, next up we've got Greater Tanuki, which is actually another ramp piece. So this one costs 4 and green, and it's a 6/5 with trample, which is just a solid creature. But it has channel, which means you can pay 2 and a green and discard it to search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So this way you actually are ramping with this card. And that's very nice, very useful, good backup, right? But the cool thing is that if you have already ramped enough, then you can just cast it as a 6/5 trample, which is also great. So just an all-around great card. And Generous Ent and Greater Tanuki are both options to find with Eternal Witness. If you've ramped with Greater Tanuki or found a land with Generous Ent, and you either need another land or you need a threat to play with all the ramp you've developed, mana you've developed, then you can actually just play Eternal Witness, pull one of those back into your hand from the graveyard, and then cast it. So that's pretty good interaction there. All right, Steel Huckite is just a super solid option to get rid of a lot of things in many cases. So it costs 6 mana. It's a 5/5 with flying, and you can pay 2 to give it +1/+0 until end of turn. And you can pay X to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Huckite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. So basically, if you attack with this and actually deal combat damage to your opponent, then you can just pay any amount of mana, and that includes 0, to activate this ability. And then you destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X that they control. Really phenomenal way to get rid of a bunch of tokens, because most tokens have a mana cost of 0. If they have not copied something, right? So Gruff Triplets, the tokens actually have a mana cost of 6. However, most things that just create a token, the token has a mana value of 0. So you can just clear out all of those all at once with Steel Hellkite. And you can also get rid of stuff with hexproof or shroud, or just whatever you need really with Steel Hellkite, because it doesn't target and it takes care of all of them all at once with that same mana value. So phenomenal option. It's also just great to have a flyer, both to attack and block with. All right, so now we have Stormkeld Vanguard. This one costs 4 green, and it's a 6/7. And a Stormkeld Vanguard can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. So another great option if your opponent has a bunch of little creatures, you can just play something that can't be blocked by little creatures, right? It also has this adventure, which is very convenient. So you can play as the adventure first, and then if you do play as an adventure, then you exile the card and you can play as the creature whenever you can play a creature. Right? And the adventure is 1 green to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Very simple. But one thing that you can do with that then is you can use Fierce Empath to tutor for Stormkeld Vanguard and then cast the adventure. And that way you actually only need a total of 3 mana at any one point to destroy an artifact or enchantment. And you can find it from Fierce Empath. The other option, if you do have plenty of mana, is to find Woodland Bellower and then use it to find Reclamation Sage. You just got a couple different options there. And this one does not need you to be up to 6 mana to use it. So next up we've got Woodland Bellower, and we've already talked about that. We have then at 7 mana, a couple of interesting cards actually combo with each other basically. So Thorn Mammoth costs 5 green, and it's a 6/6 with trample, which is just, pretty solid as it is, right? But whenever Thorn Mammoth or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Thorn Mammoth fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. So that's a good way to get rid of opponent's creatures. 6/6 fighting with something will often do the trick, and generally survive too, okay? Which we definitely like. One other really, really nice thing about, though, is that whenever any creature enters the battlefield under your control, you have Thorn Mammoth fight a creature. So if we have Thorn Mammoth out and then we play Gruff Triplets, we can fight like 3 creatures, or we could fight 1 creature 3 times. Lots of fun things we could do with that. And Spearbreaker Behemoth actually makes the fighting 1 creature 3 times rather useful. So this one costs 5 green for 5/5, and it's just straight up indestructible. Okay, which is pretty awesome. And it has the ability to pay 1, and target creature with power 5 or greater gains indestructible until end of turn. So you can use that to make Thorn Mammoth indestructible, and then have it fight, 1 thing 3 times, or 2 times, or whatever. Or you can just have it fight 2 6/6s in a turn, or 1 6/6, and still survive. So pretty useful. We can also make Woodland Bellower indestructible, or Stormkeld Vanguard indestructible, or Steel Hellkite indestructible, Gruff Triplets once they get bigger, Rare Tanuki. We've got lots of different options. Generous Hint, tons of different options for what to use that ability on, and having stuff be indestructible can be very, very convenient at times. All right, so that's basically the list. We do have 18 basic forests as well. So let's head to the playtester and see how it plays out. Now, obviously, many of your search targets are interactive pieces, so let's keep that in mind as you're playtesting, that you won't really be able to accurately playtest that element of it, but you can kind of imagine what your opponent might be doing. Okay. This one has 3 lands and potentially a 4th land. It has a couple of really interesting things to play. It also has Wild Growth and Arbor Elf, so that's a pretty solid hand. So we're going to play a Forest, tap it, play an Arbor Elf. Okay, so, perfect. There's our Fierce Empath, popping its little head out. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to play Forest. We're going to tap the Forest to play Wild Growth on this forest that's still untapped. We're going to tap that for 2 mana. Then we're going to tap Arbor Elf to untap this forest, tap the forest for another 2 mana. So now we have a total of 4 mana. Okay, and then we're going to play Fierce Empath, and we're going to go find something. Okay, I, in general, default to finding Gruff Triplets. Okay, it's just a super solid option. It's hard to go wrong with Gruff Triplets. Okay, and we have Disciple of Fairy Elise, which we can use to sacrifice one and make it bigger and draw cards. So that's pretty good. Okay, but of course, many of these are very, very solid options, especially if we know that our opponent doesn't have any flyers and doesn't have a lot of removal. Steel Hellkite's really good option. One nice thing though about Gruff Triplets is that even if your opponent has removal, it's still very it's still very hard for them to really get rid of it all in an advantageous sort of way. All right, so then next turn. Oh, cool, we've got Watchful Radstag. All right, now definitely one option with Watchful Radstag around is to actually just slow roll the Gruff Triplets. If you're not under a lot of pressure, I would definitely consider doing that. Okay, because Watchful Radstag and then Gruff Triplets and then a big thing is pretty effective at flooding the board. If you are under a lot of pressure, though, just go straight to Gruff Triplets. All right, so totally depends. This is turn 3, and we'll just do the Watchful Radstag route because that is honestly just a ton of fun. Okay, so next turn, let's see. Oh, we have a Generous Hint. Well, that's fun. So we can use that to get another land if we want. Options there. All right, so let's go with. Actually, let's go get another land. So we'll forest cycle that. Put that there. And go search for a forest. Oh, cool. And that goes into our hand. But then we play it. Okay. So now we will tap that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tap that and 5, 6. Okay. And there we go. Basically, I searched for the forest just to make sure that I'd have enough for Thorn Mammoth next turn if I felt like it. Also, if I needed to, replace Arbor Elf, it's just nice to have lands, right? We don't want to miss a land drop if we can help it. Okay, so Gruff Triplets comes into play. When it enters, you're going to have Watchful Radstag trigger, resolve first, because we have these 2 triggers. It's going to make copies of itself, and this is going to evolve. We want Watchful Radstag to evolve first. Okay, so we're going to evolve it, and we will make a copy of it. Okay, we want to do it in that order because then Gruff Triplets will make 2 copies of itself, and Watchful Radstag and Watchful Radstag copy will both see them. Now, Watchful Radstag is already a 3/3, and they are 3/3, so it won't really care about it. However, this one does because it's just a 2/2. So it evolves and makes a copy of itself. Okay. Since these came into play at the same time, it's not like you can actually make another copy or something like that. Okay. Because now this one is a 3/3, so it's not going to evolve a second time. All right, but now we've set ourselves up with 3 copies of Watchful Radstag, so that when we play something big, all of them will evolve and make copies of themselves. Okay. So next turn, oh great, another Arbor Elf. Solid. Okay, so now we totally have options here. We could play the Arbor Elf and Disciple of Fairy Elise, sacrificing Gruff Triplets to make the other ones bigger. We could play Thorn Mammoth, which is what we would totally do if we needed to remove something this turn. Since this is turn 5, I'll assume that our opponent has done something, right? And they might have something annoying that needs to be gotten rid of. We do also have just a bunch of creatures, and so that's pretty good. But if we get rid of our opponent's creatures, then we can attack in more easily. All right. So I will go the route of playing Thorn Mammoth. That will also duplicate our Watchful Radstags. So that would be good. If we just play Disciple of Elise, we'll just get one copy. If we play Thorn Mammoth first, though, then we'll get 3 copies, and each of those will then evolve with Disciple of Elise next turn. Okay, so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Play Thorn Mammoth, have it fight something. Okay, and this will evolve, and this will evolve, and this will evolve, and then each of those makes a token copy. All right. Of course, these are great chump blockers as needed. Fierce Empath is as well. But now we've also just got a 6/6, and we took out one of the creatures. So also Gruff Triplets make great chump blockers because you actively want them to die. Right? All around phenomenal options. Okay, so next up, oh, perfect. We've got Wild Growth. Sweet. Well, we'll do that first then. So tap a forest to play Wild Growth. All right, there we go. And we can then tap that forest, tap Arbor Elf, untap, retap for 6 mana to play Disciple of Freyalise. All right, so play Disciple. That will let Thorn Mammoth fight something else. And then we'll sacrifice the actual Gruff Triplets, which will put 3 +1/+1 counters on each of these. We will draw 3 cards, and we will gain 3 life. All right. Also, when Disciple of Freyalise entered, all of these Watchful Radstags evolved. Okay. And made copies of themselves. So you see how this kind of gets a little out of hand pretty quickly, actually, especially if you sequence it properly. All right. So now we've just got a bunch of little stags. We've got a bunch of trample creatures. We're going to attack with them. Basically right away. We could also play Arbor Elves. If we play a couple of Arbor Elves, then we've got some more Thorn Mammoth triggers for fighting stuff to really clear the way if anything was annoying. And then just attack with a couple 6/6s. This one's now a 4/4. This one's a 4/4. And we've got several 3/3s. So that should be 12. This can attack if it still has an ability to, if it's not taking enough damage to have it be a problem if it gets blocked, or if your opponent has no blockers left because you just killed them all, right? But definitely these can attack, and these all can attack, and that would be 12 more damage right here, and so that'd be 24, 28, that'd be 32 damage you're swinging for. And a lot of it's just spread out or trample or something like that, right? So rather effective, and you've got another tutor in your hand and a way to return Gruff Triplets next turn. So just lots of fun options if this doesn't actually win the game. Okay, but honestly, it should. All right. So that's basically it. Just a fun little game of figure out exactly what you need, whether it's big stuff or little stuff. You can often search for exactly what the situation requires and get the job done pretty quickly. So anyways, it's a super fun deck. I hope you enjoy it too. And if you build it, please let me know. And if you like this video, please subscribe so that YouTube's algorithms and I know that you liked it. And definitely look forward to seeing you next time for some more Epic on a Budget deck lists. Until then, have a good one. Ciao.